They say the worst kind of pain isn't loud. It's quiet. It sits between the words people use to humiliate you and the silence that follows when no one defends you. The day Richard Hamilton fired me, he thought he was removing me from the family legacy. He didn't realize he was handing me the blueprints to dismantle his entire empire. His voice cut through the chatter. Calm and sharp. "You're fired. Poor results." My stepbrother Evan smirked. My mother Grace stared at the tablecloth, her jaw tight, a portrait of silent compliance. And for a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard him. But I hadn't. Everyone else heard it too. The conference room glittered with polished glass and silver trays of untouched food. My family believed that wealth could disguise cruelty. The chandelier above us shimmered like it was enjoying the show. Richard Hamilton leaned back in his chair, his suit crisp, his cufflinks catching the light. To the world, he was a respected CEO. To me, he was a man who once promised to take care of me after my real father, Daniel Park, died. Promises, I learned, mean very little when power gets involved. "I'm sorry," what I managed to whisper, my throat tightening. Richard's smile didn't falter. "You're terminated, Elena. We've reviewed your department's numbers. Poor performance. This company needs strong leadership, not emotional distractions." Evan chuckled, swirling the drink in his hand. Translation: you were never cut out for this family business anyway. I looked around the long mahogany table. Every seat was filled, uncles' cousins, board members' faces I'd grown up with. No one spoke. Some looked away. Others studied me like I was already gone. My mother's hands were folded neatly in her lap, knuckles white, a single tear threatening to betray her forced composure. She didn't meet my eyes. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You could have told me privately." Richard's tone was flat. "Business decisions are never private. Consider this, a learning moment." Evan leaned closer, his grin spreading. "Guess you'll have plenty of time to reflect, little sister." He wasn't really my brother. Not by blood. But he wore that word like armor, using it only when he wanted to remind me I didn't belong. I wanted to scream, to throw the documents on the table and demand respect, but Richard's gaze pinned me down. The same cold, assessing look he gave employees right before cutting them off. So I stood up instead. My chair scraped against the floor, the sound louder than I intended. Every head turned. "Thank you for the learning moment," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. As I walked out, Evan whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You're on your own now." He was wrong. I'd always been on my own. Outside the boardroom, the hallway was cold, the hum of air conditioning almost mocking. I paused at the glass wall overlooking downtown Manhattan. The skyline shimmered, indifferent to my humiliation. I pressed my hand against the glass, watching my reflection blur against the city lights. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was calculating. When I stepped into the elevator, the doors closed with a soft chime, cutting off the sound of their laughter from down the hall. I exhaled for the first time. My phone buzzed, an automated HR email confirming my termination. Access revoked. Effective immediately. Efficient. Ruthless. Exactly how Richard liked things. By the time I reached the lobby, security was already waiting. The guard, a kind older man named Frank, looked uncomfortable as he handed me a cardboard box. "I'm sorry, Miss Park. They said to make sure you clear your desk tonight." "Don't be," I said, forcing a smile. "You're just doing your job." Like I did mine. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I never thought you were the problem." I nodded, clutching the box tighter. That single line, small quiet, meant more than any apology upstairs ever could. Outside, the rain had started. I walked down the steps into the storm, each drop stinging like a reminder, you are no longer one of them. Cars sped by, headlights slicing through the dark. My heels slipped once on the wet pavement, but I didn't stop. The city smelled of asphalt and cold, wet metal. When I finally reached the curb, my phone buzzed again, 12 missed calls from my mother. I didn't answer. Then a new text flashed across the screen. From Evan, told you. Should have stayed in your lane. I deleted it. Then another message arrived from an unknown number. Ms. Park, my name is Adrian Cole. I represent your late father's estate. We need to talk. I frowned, rain dripping off my hair. My father's estate had been settled years ago. Or so I'd been told. For the first time that night, something inside me shifted. Not anger focus. I walked toward the subway cardboard box in one hand, phone in the other. The reflection in the train window showed a woman with ruined mascara but eyes that no longer looked broken. When I got home, I placed the box on the table, family photos files, an old pen with the Hamilton logo. I stared at it, all the symbols of a family that had never truly accepted me. One by one, I began throwing things into the trash. Except for one photo, me and my real father, Daniel Park, standing outside his small tech firm years ago. His handwriting on the back read, "Never let them tell you what you can't build." I ran my thumb over the words, whispering, "I won't." The rain outside grew heavier, tapping against the window like a clock counting down to something inevitable. By midnight, I was sitting at my laptop searching for the name Adrian Cole. The email address looked legitimate: Cole and Braxton, Legal Associates, Boston. My pulse quickened as I opened the message. Miss Park, per Daniel. Park's final instructions: there is a document concerning your inheritance that has never been disclosed. It directly involves Hamilton Industries. Please contact me immediately. I stared at the words until they blurred. My father had left something behind. Something Richard and Evan had kept from me. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the storm vibrating through the walls. For the first time since that meeting, I smiled, not out of joy but certainty. They thought they'd buried me. They didn't realize I was already planting roots. Tomorrow I'd call that lawyer. Tonight I'd remember my real father's words, "Never let them tell you what you can't build." The Hamilton silence followed me, but it was drowned out by the noise of my new reality. I ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in New Jersey that smelled faintly of mildew and regret. The humiliation was over. The exile had begun. The wallpaper peeled, the heater coughed, and the neighbor's dog barked all night. The cold tiles of the bathroom floor, the grease stains on the ancient stove. It was all an insult to the pristine white-glove world Richard Hamilton curated. But for the first time in years, no one could take anything more from me. The company car was gone. My security card disabled. My name wiped off the internal network within an hour. But I was still breathing, still me. The first few weeks were a blur of anger and silence. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking emails. Mom texted once, short, cautious, "You should apologize." He might reconsider. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. Apologize for being disposable, for not being born with the last name Hamilton. I didn't respond. I got a temp job at a DeFi startup in Newark, barely enough to pay rent. The office was small walls covered with motivational posters that peeled at the corners. The team was young, hungry, maybe a little naive. I envied that kind of optimism. I kept my head down and worked building code no one saw and fixing systems no one thanked me for. But it was quiet work. Safe work. One evening, after another 10-hour day, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. No return address. Inside a single business card, embossed with silver letters, Adrian Cole, attorney at law. Below it, note written in neat, deliberate handwriting, "There are things your father wanted you to know. Call me." I froze. My father, Daniel Park, had been gone for over 15 years. A heart attack, they said. A tragedy that turned Grace from a young widow into the perfect wife for a powerful man like Richard Hamilton. But Daniel's memory was like a locked room in my mind, something I only visited when I was alone, and even then never for long. I called. The line rang twice before a calm, confident voice answered. "Miss Park, I've been expecting you." We met 2 days later in a law office downtown. Everything about Adrian Cole screamed precision, from the sharp cut of his suit to the measured way he stirred his coffee. He handed me a manila folder. Your father left a will. A complex one. Parts of it were delayed contingent on your reaching a certain age. Those documents were misplaced after your mother remarried. Misplaced, I repeated, my voice flat. Or buried, he said. Inside the folder was a single-page Daniel Park signature at the bottom, the ink slightly faded. My chest tightened as I read, Park Holdings owns 47% of Hamilton Industries. 47%. Almost half. I looked up. That's impossible. Richard runs everything. He always has. Richard runs what the board lets him run, Adrian said, eyes steady. But according to this document, you, Miss Park, are the rightful successor of Park Holdings, and by extension, a controlling shareholder in Hamilton Industries. Your stepfather has been managing assets that were never his. The room tilted slightly, the words sinking in like stones in water. Why are you telling me this now? Adrian leaned forward, lowering his voice. Because people like Richard Hamilton don't lose power quietly. He knows this document exists. He's been trying to make sure it never resurfaces. And you, he paused, you are the last person he wants to have it. For a long time, I said nothing. The rain outside hit the glass in rhythmic bursts. Somewhere deep inside, I felt something shift, not relief, not even anger, but a sharp clarity. Like the first breath after being underwater too long. What would it take, I asked, to make this right? Adrian smiled faintly. Time, strategy, and patience. Revenge, he said, isn't about striking first. It's about striking last. I left his office with the folder clutched tight to my chest. On the subway back to New Jersey, I couldn't stop replaying the past, the meetings Richard dismissed me from, the smirks, the subtle ways he reminded me I didn't belong. Evan's voice echoing, "You're on your own now." Maybe I was. But maybe that was exactly what I needed to be. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents across the kitchen table. The paper looked old, fragile, yet more powerful than any weapon I could ever hold. I ran my fingers along my father's signature, the last mark he left in this world. You didn't leave me anything, did you, Dad? I whispered. The old radiator clanked loudly, shattering the quiet. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, cold, distant, glittering like promises waiting to be claimed. For years I'd played by their rules, followed their hierarchy, and begged for scraps of acknowledgement. But if what Adrian said was true, the boardroom that had exiled me was sitting on my inheritance. They thought they'd erased me. They didn't know I was coming back. The next morning, I opened a new file on my laptop. I typed one line in bold-centered text, Project Reclamation. And beneath it, Step 1, learn the game. Step 2, rewrite the rules. When I hit save, I felt the faintest spark of something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that a storm was quietly forming in a small, forgotten apartment across the river. And this time, the storm had my name on it. The air in Adrian Cole's office smelled faintly of cedar and old books too calm for the kind of truth he was about to hand me. He slid a brown envelope across the desk, the sound sharp against the silence. Your father left this sealed under attorney-client privilege, he said, his voice steady. It was never opened because someone else claimed there was no next of kin. Someone named Richard Hamilton. My pulse stuttered. He's my stepfather. Adrian's brows furrowed. He filed paperwork stating you were financially independent and not entitled to any of Daniel Park's business interests. My throat went dry. That's a lie. Then you should open this, he said simply, pushing the envelope closer. I broke the wax seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an amended trust document dated 2 months before my father's death. Daniel Park had transferred 47% of his holdings in Park Holdings to me. Below, in neat handwriting, was a single note for Elena. Someday this will mean more than my name. My chest tightened, but my focus sharpened, cutting through the shock. The number was real. 47%, I whispered. Adrian nodded. Park Holdings quietly acquired a substantial stake in Hamilton Industries before your father passed. Richard and Evan were aware of it. They had your father's shares absorbed through a merger maneuver masking your inheritance under shell entities. So technically, you own nearly half of Hamilton Industries, he finished. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. They've known this all along. He nodded. And they've made sure you didn't. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Years of humiliation of being treated like an outsider all came rushing back the meetings I wasn't invited to, the projects Evan took credit for my mother's forced neutrality. Adrian's voice softened. Miss Park, I've seen a lot of corporate deceit, but this was personal. I stared at the document again, tracing my father's signature. He knew they'd try to erase me, I murmured. He left me proof. Adrian leaned forward. You have two options. We can file a claim now, but it'll go public. Hamilton will bury you in lawsuits. Or I can keep quiet, I said, finishing for him. He nodded. Build your leverage first. When the time comes, they won't see it coming. I folded the document carefully and slid it back into the envelope. I'm not ready to fight them yet, I said. But I will be. As I left the office, the city looked different, colder, sharper, like I was seeing it through new glass. Every window felt like an eye watching, judging, daring me to act. I didn't have power yet, but I had something better time. That night I drove to my father's old tech building on the edge of Newark, the one I hadn't visited since the funeral. The lights were off, dust covering the glass doors. Inside, the air was thick with memory wires, blueprints, sketches of systems he'd dreamed up, but never sold. I walked to his old office where his desk still faced the city skyline. There, taped to the back of his computer monitor, was a yellowed sticky note. If they ever silence you, build louder. I sank into his chair, the leather creaking softly. I could almost hear his voice, patient, practical kind. He'd always believed that legacy wasn't about inheritance. It was about continuation. So I began the work. For weeks I studied Richard's vulnerabilities and my father's designs, turning silence into strategy. I didn't want revenge through noise. I wanted precision. One morning I received an alert, an article on Market Insider: Hamilton Industries acquires minority stake in DeFi startup. The startup's name rang a bell. I'd consulted with them 2 months prior. Their acquisition value, $20 million. My work has contributed to it. Richard's company had bought them out for less than half their worth. That was when it clicked. This was the pattern. They crushed innovation to keep control. And if I wanted justice, I needed to become what they feared most: competition. Adrian called one afternoon. You've been busy. Just honoring my father's memory, I replied. You know you're building something dangerous, right? Good, I said. They taught me what danger looks like. At night, I'd sometimes dream of that meeting room, the chandelier, the laughter, the finality, and Richard's tone. In my dream, I'd stand again before him, but this time he'd hesitate before speaking, because he'd know I was no longer the girl he could dismiss. I kept my life small, no parties, no distractions. I learned to study silence, the way markets moved, how people hesitated before betrayal, how greed always left fingerprints. Sometimes I'd call my mother. The conversations were polite, hollow. She'd say, I hope you're moving on. And I'd reply, I'm moving forward. By the second year, I had saved enough to hire a single employee, a data analyst named Lisa Bright, and curious too good for her old job. I told her only what she needed to know. Trust wasn't free anymore. One evening while reviewing our quarterly growth, I saw something that made me stop breathing. Hamilton Industries had just announced a new strategic partnership with one of the same firms EP Capital quietly funded. Only this time we owned controlling interest through a different shell. The press release called it a merger of innovation and legacy. I smiled. They had no idea who they'd just partnered with. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights, each one a promise my father made and Richard broke. 47%, I whispered. Let's make it 51. The reflection in the window stared back at me no longer, the girl humiliated at that family meeting, but the woman building an empire beneath their feet. They'd erase the name Park from their boardroom. I'd carve EP Capital into the bedrock of their market instead. The nights stretched thin, lit only by the pale glow of code and caffeine. My apartment wasn't a home anymore. It was a battlefield for ideas. Whiteboards covered with scribbles, sticky notes crawling up the walls. Coffee cups, monuments to sleeplessness, ringed my monitor, each stain reflecting the laptop's fierce blue light. EP Capital, I whispered to myself one night, typing the name into a blank registration form. It didn't sound like much, but it was mine. The initials stood for Elena Park, the name I'd buried the day Grace remarried Richard Hamilton. Starting a company with nothing but spite and savings wasn't glamorous. I coded until sunrise, ate instant noodles between system tests, and learned the art of pretending I wasn't terrified. Every rejection email felt like a bruise. Investors wanted credibility. Translation: a man, a pedigree, a family name that carried weight. I had none of those. But I had something else, an idea. A predictive security architecture that could detect financial fraud before it happened. If Hamilton Industries had fired me for being too ambitious, then fine. I'd weaponize that ambition into something they couldn't control. The following 2 years blurred into milestones. EP Capital launched its beta system, a cybersecurity platform for decentralized transactions. Small clients, first independent traders, boutique funds. The reviews came quietly, but they were good. A tech magazine even called it the ghost project that might change DeFi security. Still, the financial struggle was brutal. Some weeks I could barely afford groceries. My heating broke one February night and I coded wearing 2 jackets, fingers numb, breath fogging the air. But each new client felt like oxygen. Then one morning an email arrived from Marble & Finch Investments, a mid-tier venture firm out of Boston. The message was short. We've been following your progress. Interested in a conversation about partnership, I read it twice, then again. When we finally met over Zoom, I was expecting another skeptical investor in a navy suit, asking patronizing questions. Instead, I found a woman, Leah Finch, mid-30s, sharp eyes, calm smile. You built this architecture yourself, she asked, scanning my presentation. Yes, I said, pretending my voice wasn't shaking. She smiled. You don't sound like someone who pitches for funding. You sound like someone who dictates terms. I stopped waiting a long time ago. Leah smiled. Good. Because you're about to scale faster than you realize. 2 months later, Marble & Finch invested $3 million in EP Capital. The company moved into a small office downtown. I hired 2 developers and a part-time operations assistant, Lisa Tran, who handled everything from payroll to making sure I ate lunch. You know, Lisa said once while sorting receipts, most people would have given up after what you went through. I smiled faintly. Most people didn't grow up in the Hamilton house. She laughed, not knowing how true that was. The architecture I'd built from sleepless nights started showing up in industry reports under a new nickname, the Sentinel Framework. Ironically, it caught the attention of Hamilton Industries. They didn't know I was behind it. Everything was registered under EP Capital, with no mention of my name. One afternoon, Lisa rushed into my office, phone in hand. You're not going to believe who's asking for a demo. I looked up. Who? She turned the screen toward me. The email subject line read, Request for Presentation, Hamilton Industries Security Division. For a moment, all I could do was stare. I could almost hear Richard's voice again. You're fired. Poor results. Now they were reaching out to me, to the company I'd built in the ashes of that humiliation. I leaned back, breathing slowly. Set up the meeting, I said. The demo was scheduled for early March at Hamilton headquarters. Walking back into that building after 3 years was like stepping onto a battlefield. The air smelled like old money and fear. My palms were instantly slick, and the cold knot of humiliation from that first day tightened in my stomach. The lobby looked the same, polished stone floors, security guards who didn't recognize me. I smiled at that. We were escorted to a glass conference room overlooking the city. Evan was there, looking older, sharper, but just as smug. Richard sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. Miss Park, Richard said, extending a hand. I shook it without hesitation. You're with EP Capital? Yes, I said. We're here to discuss Sentinel's integration protocol. Evan gave a low chuckle. Funny. I didn't know you'd gone into consulting. I didn't, I replied, pulling out my tablet. I went into the building. As I presented, I caught Richard watching me, not with disdain this time, but with something closer to calculation. He understood power when he saw it, and I could see the gears turning behind his calm exterior. When I finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Richard said, "Impressive work. We'll be in touch." I gathered my things, nodded, and left without looking back. But before I reached the elevator, Evan's voice followed me. "Nice project," he said. "But don't get comfortable. You'll never compete with Hamilton." I turned slowly. "Evan," I said, smiling just enough to unsettle him, "this isn't a competition. It's reclamation." He frowned, not understanding. "Not yet." Back in the cab, I checked my email. A new message blinked at the top of the screen. Confirmation transaction complete. Attached was the final document from Marble & Finch's latest move, a strategic acquisition that increased EP Capital's stake in Hamilton Industries by another 7%. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city lights, each one a promise my father made, and Richard broke. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the girl who'd been fired. I felt like the architect of something inevitable. 47%, I whispered. "Let's make it 51. The reflection in the window stared back at me, no longer the girl humiliated at that family meeting, but the woman building an empire beneath their feet. They'd erased the name Park from their boardroom. I'd carve EP Capital into the bedrock of their market instead. 2 years after I walked out of that boardroom in silence, I owned a third of it. Not physically, financially. Every acquisition. Hamilton Industries made in the last 6 months, every anonymous investor buying small chunks of the company through subsidiaries, those were mine. EP Capital had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We operated in shadows disguised as a constellation of independent funds and shell corporations. Every deal, every investment, every whisper of movement was part of one plan to take back what my father built and what Richard stole. The night the board announced their annual shareholders meeting, I booked a suite at the Manhattan Grand. From the penthouse balcony, I could see the lights of Hamilton Tower glowing like a crown in the distance. I had studied every inch of that building when I still worked there, every elevator code and hallway camera. Tonight, I did not need access. I owned part of it. Lisa entered the room holding a folder. "You might want to see this." She laid out the document, Hamilton Industries Shareholder Registry Q3. My eyes scanned the page until I reached the name of the largest minority shareholder, Hawthorne Holdings, LLC. That was us, EP Capital's most discreet shell. And through it, I now controlled 32% of the company. Lisa grinned. "They still think you are just an investor out of Singapore." "Good," I said. "Let them keep thinking that." Down below, traffic pulsed through the streets, the city alive with indifference. The irony made me smile. 2 years ago, they had escorted me out like a failure. Now they were working for me without even knowing it. A week later, the meeting took place in the same conference hall where Richard had fired me. He looked older now, heavier, his smile tighter. Evan sat beside him, scrolling through his tablet like the heir apparent he thought he was. I was not there in person, but my proxy was. Adrian Cole, sharp suit, steady posture, eyes that missed nothing. When the roll call began, Richard's assistant called out, "Representing Hawthorne Holdings." Adrian stood. "Present." Richard glanced up, clearly intrigued. "And Mr. Hawthorne could not join us himself. He prefers discretion," Adrian replied evenly. "He is watching remotely." And he was through my laptop screen miles away. The meeting began like all corporate rituals: financial summaries, performance metrics, talk of strategic growth. Evan led a presentation about expanding into digital infrastructure. He was slick, polished, confident, until Adrian raised his hand. "Mr. Hamilton." "I have a question regarding your new funding partnerships," Adrian said, voice calm but cutting. "Could you confirm the valuation process used for these acquisitions?" Evan blinked. "Excuse me?" "You purchased several companies this quarter below market rate, all connected through similar financial intermediaries. Adrian continued. It suggests insider coordination. Hawthorne Holdings would like to ensure transparency. Murmurs filled the room. Richard's jaw tightened. Our business practices are above reproach, he said quickly. Perhaps your client should focus on his own portfolio. Adrian smiled faintly. Oh, he does. Very closely. From my suite, I watched Richard's composure fracture just slightly. He hated losing control, especially when he could not see where the attack was coming from. The rest of the meeting dragged on, but the tension did not ease. When it finally ended, Richard pulled Adrian aside. Tell your client, he said, his voice low, that Hamilton Industries does not appreciate interference. Adrian replied with perfect calm. Interference? No, Mr. Hamilton. We are simply exercising our ownership rights. Richard froze. Ownership? Adrian handed him a sealed envelope. You will find the latest equity breakdown inside. I am sure it will clarify things. Richard opened it right there. His eyes scanned the numbers, and for a moment his entire face drained of color. From my vantage point, my heart hammered a visceral victory pulse. I remembered Richard's cold eyes on me in this very room, and the shame finally dissolved, replaced by a crystalline clarity he knew. I gripped the edge of my laptop, resisting the urge to cheer. Seeing his defeat was a powerful rush, an acid neutralization of years of internalized humiliation. The power wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the knowledge that his carefully constructed reality was shattering under the weight of my father's forgotten legacy. This was not greed. It was compensation for a vision that was stolen. Hawthorne Holdings owns 32%, Adrian nodded, as of yesterday. Congratulations. You have a new largest shareholder. Evan leaned over his father's shoulder. Who the hell is Hawthorne? Adrian straightened his tie. A name you will be hearing often. Have a pleasant evening. The moment Adrian stepped out of that room, my phone rang. His voice was calm but edged with triumph. It is done. They know someone is inside now. I exhaled slowly, staring out over the skyline. Good. Let them feel the ground shift. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The following week, Hamilton Industries released a statement to shareholders. We welcome new investment partners and look forward to continued collaboration with all equity holders. It was corporate language for we are panicking quietly. Evan called a press conference soon after trying to regain confidence. Hamilton remains a family-led company, he said proudly. Our values are unshakable. From my couch, I watched the live stream sipping coffee. Unshakable, I repeated under my breath. Let us test that. That night I authorized another acquisition, small but symbolic, a logistics firm Hamilton once tried to buy and failed. We bought it under a different shell and renamed it Park Logistics. When the paperwork cleared, Adrian sent me the confirmation. You are becoming quite the empire builder, Elena. Not an empire, I said softly. Correction. The next morning, an email appeared in my inbox from a name I had not seen in years. From Richard Hamilton. Subject: private meeting request. He wrote only one line: I believe we should speak face to face. I stared at it for a long time. He did not know who I was yet, but he could feel the foundation shaking beneath his feet. I typed a single sentence in reply: I agree. Name the time. When I hit send, my reflection on the laptop screen smiled back, cool, unreadable, patient. He had called me a failure once. He had made sure everyone watched me fall. Now he would meet the shareholder he had created. The next move was his, but the endgame was mine. The morning after our meeting, the headlines broke before I even opened my eyes. Hamilton Industries CEO considers transition of leadership, sources say. The words glowed across my phone screen in that familiar sterile font. Every news outlet had picked it up. Richard was losing control, and he knew it. I slipped out of bed, pulled my robe tighter, and stood by the window. Manhattan's skyline was a mosaic of gold and steel under the rising sun. From up here, the city always looked calm, as if power struggles didn't exist. But I had learned the truth long ago. Every window hid someone plotting to keep what wasn't theirs. By noon, Lisa arrived with coffee and the latest numbers. "Investor confidence is up," she said, scrolling through her tablet. "Everyone thinks the new direction rumors are good for the stock." "Let them think whatever they want," I said. "It buys us time." She hesitated. "You think he'll really step down? He'll try to negotiate first," I said. "He always does. But the board won't back him now. They're survivalists, not loyalists." Lisa nodded, but I saw the worry in her eyes. She'd never played in a world where people smiled while setting traps. "Elena," she said quietly, "I know this is business for you, but what happens when it stops being about revenge and starts being about you?" I looked at her. "That's the point, Lisa. It's always been about me. He took my father's name, my company, and my future. I'm just taking them back." She said nothing more. By the end of the week, Richard announced an internal restructuring. The statement was short, polished, sterile, exactly the kind of lie men like him thought could disguise defeat. But behind closed doors, everything was cracking. Grace, my mother, called that night. I hadn't spoken to her in months. "Elena," she began, her voice fragile. "What are you doing?" I closed my laptop. "Restoring balance. I heard rumors," she said. "Richard's under pressure. The board's panicking." "This isn't you. You were never what I asked. Never strong enough. Never ruthless enough. That's what he taught me to be, Mother. I learned from the best." Her silence was heavier than her words. "He's still your father," she said at last. "No," I whispered. "He's yours." I hung up before she could respond. That night I couldn't sleep. Every choice I'd made, every calculated step flickered in my mind like a reel of unfinished film. Victory didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like the cold, clinical completion of a contract. Still, I pressed forward. The next morning, Adrian called. "He's stalling," he said, "trying to consolidate votes before the board meets next week." "Then we'll move faster," I replied. "I want a seat at that meeting. If Hawthorne Holdings controls a third of the company, we have a right to attend." He hesitated. "Are you ready to show your face?" "Yes," I said. "It's time they remember who I am." The boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. Same polished table, same sterile light, same leather chairs that had witnessed my humiliation 2 years ago. Only now I wasn't standing outside. Richard sat at the head of the table, flanked by Evan and several nervous directors. He looked tired, older, but his pride hadn't aged a day. When Adrian entered with me behind him, whispers rippled through the room. Richard's head snapped up. "Ms. Park," he said, his voice caught between disbelief and dread. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, setting my briefcase down. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Evan stood abruptly. "What the hell is this? You don't belong here." Adrian spoke smoothly. "According to corporate statute, Ms. Park represents Hawthorne Holdings, currently the largest shareholder of Hamilton Industries." Richard's knuckles whitened. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what you want?" I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I'm not taking anything, Richard. I'm claiming what's mine." The room fell silent. Even Evan, always so loud, said nothing. I slid a folder across the table, documents, signatures, filings. "Here's the merger fraud you orchestrated. The proof of forged signatures transferring my father's holdings. And the contracts showing your personal accounts siphoning company funds through shell vendors." One of the board members, an older man named Harrison, frowned. "If this is true, we're legally obligated to open an inquiry." "It's true," I said, "and you'll find everything you need there." Evan scoffed. "You think you can destroy this family with paperwork?" "No," I said quietly. "I can destroy it with truth." Richard rose to his feet, his composure unraveling. "Enough. You're bluffing." "Am I?" I asked, sliding one last document forward. "Then you won't mind if I send this to the SEC." He stared at it. I could see the panic behind his eyes, the understanding that everything he'd built was about to collapse, not from scandal, but from exposure. Richard pressed his hand flat on the table, forcing out the words, "The meeting is adjourned. We will address this internally." The directors hesitated. Evan looked from me to his father, realization dawning that something irreversible had just begun. When the room emptied, Richard leaned against the table, exhausted. "You've made your point," he said. I shook my head. "Not yet, but soon." I turned to leave, and as I reached the door, his voice followed me. "You're still your father's daughter," he said bitterly. He never knew when to stop either. I paused just long enough to say, that's why he built something worth fighting for. Then I walked out. That evening, my inbox exploded: calls from journalists, messages from investors, whispers of resignations. Richard's control was dissolving, the market reacting faster than his legal team could issue a denial. Lisa found me on the balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, the city glowing below. "You did it," she said softly. "He's finished." "Not yet," I said. "There's still Evan." She hesitated. "You really won't stop until it's all gone, will you?" I looked out at the skyline, the reflection of lights shimmering in my glass. "No," I said. "I'll stop when it's mine again." Below, Hamilton Tower gleamed like a dying star, and I knew its collapse would be brilliant. And somewhere inside, I knew Richard Hamilton was staring at that same skyline, realizing for the first time in his life he wasn't untouchable anymore. The message came at midnight, short and deliberate. "We need to talk. One last time. RH." I stared at it for a long moment, the glow of my laptop reflecting in the glass of my wine. One last time. It was a gamble, a final bid for control disguised as surrender. By dawn, I was sitting in the back of a black sedan, heading toward his mansion in Greenwich. The roads were still damp from rain-gray mist clinging to the trees. It looked like the kind of morning where truth hides behind fog. The house hadn't changed: massive stone pillars, white columns. The kind of wealth that tries too hard to be timeless. I stepped out of the car, heels crunching on gravel. The front doors opened before I reached them. Grace stood there. "My mother, Elena," she whispered, her voice trembling with something I couldn't read: fear, relief, maybe guilt. "Where is he?" I asked. "In his study." Her hand brushed my arm as I passed. "Please, don't destroy him." I didn't look at her. He did that himself. The study smelled of old leather and scotch. Richard was standing by the window, the morning light cutting sharp lines across his face. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, a man half erased by his own ambition. "Coffee?" he asked without turning. "I'll pass." He nodded once, then faced me. "I thought I'd have more time." "Time runs out eventually," I said. "That's not my fault." He gestured for me to sit. "You've made your point, Elena. You're clever, resourceful. I underestimated you. Congratulations. I'm not looking for approval." "Then what are you looking for?" he asked. "Because revenge doesn't build anything. It only burns." "You confuse burning with demolition, Richard. I'm clearing the site for a new foundation." He sighed, pressing his palms against the desk. "Your father was a dreamer. I admired that. But business doesn't run on dreams. When he died, I saved what he built. I turned it into something real. By stealing it. He didn't deny it. By surviving." The word hung between us like a confession. "Do you know why I called you here?" he asked. "I assume it's not for family therapy." His lips curved slightly. "I'm offering a deal. Step back quietly. I'll transfer you 10% of Hamilton's shares, enough to make you wealthy for the rest of your life. Walk away and you'll never have to fight again." I laughed softly. "You're still bargaining like I'm an employee." He met my eyes. "Because you're acting like someone desperate to prove she belongs. You have money, Elena, but you don't have power. Power comes from presence, from legacy. I built mine. You hijacked it." I rose from my chair. "No, Richard. I reclaimed it. You just didn't expect the girl you humiliated to know how to fight back." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you've won, but this world doesn't remember who started the fire, only who's left standing after it burns." "I'm fine with that," I said, "because I plan to be the one still standing." For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the silence heavy with everything that would never be forgiven. Finally, he broke it. "Evan won't let this go. He's furious, reckless. I can't control him anymore. If you keep pushing, he'll come for you. I'm not afraid of Evan. You should be, he said quietly. He's more dangerous than I ever was. You taught him how to hate you. He moved behind the desk again, reaching for a folder. Take the deal, Elena. End it before he starts something neither of you can stop. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. You always think everything can be negotiated. Some things can't. I turned toward the door. Don't make my mistake, he said behind me. Don't let pride cost you everything. I paused my hand on the doorknob. Pride didn't build this war, Richard. Lies did. Then I walked out. Grace followed me to the driveway. Elena, wait, she said, her heels clicking across the stone. He's sick. The doctors didn't want it public, but he's been... I don't want his excuses, I said sharply. It's not an excuse, she said. It's true. He's dying. The words hit me harder than I expected. How long? Months? Maybe less. I looked toward the house, the morning sun spilling through the windows. Somewhere inside, the man who'd fired me, manipulated me, and stolen my inheritance was fading away. Grace touched my hand. You have what you want. Don't lose yourself trying to take what's left. I pulled my hand back. He made sure there was nothing left years ago. As I got into the car, she called out softly, You sound just like him. The door closed before the words could reach me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city glowing beyond the glass. The deal folder still sat unopened on the counter. I could have ended it all, taken the money, walked away, let him rot in peace. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's signature, the trust papers, the years of silence. I poured a glass of whiskey and opened the folder. Inside were neatly arranged documents, the 10% share transfer, a non-disclosure agreement, and a handwritten note. You were right. I did steal it, but I also saved it. Maybe you'll understand one day. I set the letter down. The whiskey was cold and comforting. The true burn was the clinical knowledge that his final gesture was purely transactional. My phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. You should see this. Evan just called an emergency press conference. I turned on the TV. Evan stood behind a podium at Hamilton headquarters, cameras flashing. My father has been misled, he was saying, his voice smooth but hard. Our company has been infiltrated by a hostile investor. Effective immediately, I am assuming control of all major operations until further notice. My jaw tightened. The cameras zoomed in on his face, the same smirk he'd worn the day I was fired. The game changes, I whispered. But the rules are still mine. The whiskey glass trembled in my hand, catching the light. Richard had been right about one thing. The fire had started years ago, but now it is spreading. The press conference changed everything. Overnight, the headlines turned sharp. Evan Hamilton takes control amid corporate turmoil. New leadership promises stability. Father steps aside. The words were a press release, but the signal underneath was a hostile takeover warning. I watched it unfold from my office, every sound from the TV like a needle under my skin. Evan had always wanted to be his father, but now he was something worse, desperate. He stood on stage in a crisp gray suit, his voice smooth, confident, dangerous. Hamilton Industries is entering a new era, he declared. We will no longer tolerate interference from outside forces seeking to disrupt our legacy. Outside forces. He meant me. Lisa entered quietly, her face pale. He's already making calls. We just lost 2 contracts this morning. He's targeting everyone connected to EP Capital. I shut the TV off. Let him. Elena. He's not bluffing. He's freezing us out of deals, spreading rumors about insider trading. Even some of our partners are scared. I looked up at her. Then we make them afraid of the right person. Lisa hesitated. You sound just like him. I learned his language, but I write my own code. That night the storm hit: emails, subpoenas, whispers of investigation. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Evan had mobilized everything his father once used to silence rivals, lawyers, auditors, journalists. Only this time, he was aiming it all at me. By midnight, Adrian called. He's pulling strings everywhere. Half the board's already pledging loyalty to him. He wants to force you into a buyout corner you before you can move. Then I'll move first, I said. How? By showing him what he's really fighting. There was a pause on the line. You mean exposure? Yes, I said. Public exposure. The next morning I walked into the same polished stone lobby I'd been escorted out of 2 years ago. The guards didn't recognize me. The badge I flashed was real, an investor's pass registered under a Hamilton subsidiary that I ironically owned. I took the elevator to the top floor. The mirrored walls reflected the woman I'd become: black suit, calm face, no trace of the girl who once begged for dignity. When the doors opened, I found Evan in his father's old office, leaning against the desk like he'd been born there. The resemblance was uncanny, same posture, same arrogance, but his eyes were sharper, colder. He looked up and smiled. Well, if it isn't our mysterious investor. I was wondering when you'd crawl out of hiding. I didn't crawl, I said. I walked. He straightened, folding his arms. You've caused a lot of trouble for this family, Elena. My father may have tolerated it out of guilt, but I won't. So let's make this easy. Name your price. I stepped closer, unflinching. You don't have enough. Oh, I think I do, he said. Money power influenced things you've been chasing since the day you got fired. Be honest. You wanted to sit at this table again. I'm offering you that chance. I laughed softly. You really think this is about sitting at your table, Evan? I built my own. His smirk faltered just for a second. You're not untouchable. You've made enemies. I can bury you in lawsuits before you blink. Then you'd better start digging, I said, pulling a folder from my bag. I laid it on the desk between us. You might want to read that before you threaten me again. He flipped through the first few pages: financial records, forged filings, proof of his role in siphoning funds through offshore accounts. His face was drained of color. Where did you get this? You left fingerprints everywhere, I said. You learned manipulation from your father, but you never learned discretion. He slammed the folder shut. You think this scares me? I've buried worse. Not this time, I said. This time the grave is yours. He leaned forward, his voice low. You'd destroy this company just to get revenge. I met his gaze. No. I'd destroy it to rebuild it the way my father intended. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe respect. Then he laughed. You sound just like him. All idealism and fire. You think the world rewards that I stepped closer until I could see my reflection in his pupils. No. The world doesn't reward it. But I do. I turned to leave, but his voice followed me. You're playing a dangerous game, Elena. And if you think I'll lose the way he did, you're wrong. I looked back over my shoulder. The difference, Evan, is that I'm not playing. I'm finishing. Outside, rain streaked the windows. My phone buzzed again, another message from Lisa. He's retaliating. One of our accounts was frozen. But there's something else. Someone's leaking internal data from EP Capital. I froze mid-step. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever it is, they have access to our private ledgers. A cold pulse went through me. There were only 3 people with that access: me, Adrian, and Lisa herself. Check everything I said. Every login, every signature. I want answers tonight. When I hung up, I realized I was shaking, not from fear, but fury. I'd built my company on trust, and now that foundation was cracking. That night I returned to my apartment, the city outside drowned in rain. I poured myself a drink, turned off the lights, and let the darkness settle. Casualties are inevitable, I thought. But this one was personal, and I needed to locate the vulnerability now. I picked up my phone and sent one message to Adrian. It's time to play offense. His reply came seconds later. Then let's give them a storm. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the city for a heartbeat. The rain hit harder, a steady rhythm against the glass. He didn't know yet the storm had my name on it. The betrayal came at 3:17 a.m., not with noise or warning, but with a single email alert. Unauthorized access detected, EP Capital. Internal server. I sat up in bed, adrenaline already replacing sleep. My laptop glowed in the dark, the alert window pulsing red. Whoever was inside our system wasn't just browsing, they were downloading everything. Client contracts, patent filings, the code that held my entire empire together. Lisa's voice came through the phone before the first ring finished. It's happening again. They're routing through an encrypted VPN in Zurich. I can't trace the origin. Shut it down, I said, throwing on a hoodie. Now, I'm trying. But the access key is valid. It's one of ours. A cold static shock arced through my spine. Whose? There was a pause on the other end. Adrian's. The name hit like a physical blow. No, I said immediately. He wouldn't. Elena, she said quietly, the signature matches his private key. He's the only one who could have bypassed those encryption layers. For a second, the world felt static. Adrian had been with me from the beginning through every late-night strategy call, every financial maneuver that turned Hawthorne Holdings into a powerhouse. I trusted him more than anyone. Find him, I said, my voice sharp. Track his location. I already did, Lisa said. He's at Hamilton Tower. The elevator ride up to the 60th floor felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked like someone I didn't recognize, calm on the surface, rage simmering underneath. When the doors opened, the office was mostly dark, except for one light, Richard Hamilton's old conference room. I could see them through the glass, Adrian and Evan sitting across from each other, a laptop between them. I didn't knock. Tell me I'm hallucinating, I said as I stepped inside. Evan leaned back, smiling that same smile that had haunted me since the day I was fired. You're early. Adrian. My voice cracked, disbelief warring with anger. He stood slowly. Elena. Don't, I snapped. Don't you dare. It's not what it looks like, he said, hands slightly raised. It looks like you're selling me out to the man who's been trying to destroy everything we built. Evan closed the laptop, lazy and confident. Technically, he's not selling you out. He's saving himself. You left quite a mess behind false filings, offshore accounts. The regulators will eat you alive. I turned on Adrian. He's lying. Adrian's silence told me everything. Oh my God, I whispered. It was you. You leaked the documents. I had no choice, he said, his voice breaking. He threatened my family, Elena. He said he'd destroy me if I didn't give him what he wanted. I stared at him, searching his face for some trace of the man who once told me, we win together or we lose together. You could have come to me, I said. I tried, he shouted. You wouldn't have listened. You were obsessed. This, he gestured to the glowing skyline outside. This stopped being about justice a long time ago. You wanted blood. He was right. And that truth hurt worse than the betrayal itself. Evan rose from his seat, straightening his tie. Touching, really. But I have an announcement to make tomorrow. The SEC will be very interested in hearing how Elena Park's private investment firm manipulated stock positions using proprietary information from her father's estate. You can't prove that, I said. He smiled. I don't have to. I just have to say it loud enough. The room fell silent, the city beyond the windows reflecting in the polished table like 100 unblinking eyes. You think this will save you, I said quietly. You think destroying me will bring you peace? Evan's smile thinned. No, but it'll make me feel like my family finally won. I stepped closer until there were only inches between us. Your family never won anything. They stole, manipulated, and hid behind men like my father to keep the illusion alive. You're not an empire, Evan. You're an echo. For the first time, his smirk faltered. Enjoy the press, I said, turning toward the door. You'll need it before the silence hits. Behind me, Evan called out, You think you can scare me? I didn't turn around. I don't need to. You're already scared. By the time I reached the street, the sky was bruised with dawn. The air smelled like rain and smoke. My phone buzzed again. Lisa. Elena, she said, panicking in her voice. The story broke early. Someone leaked to the ledger. They're calling for a federal investigation. I stopped walking. Into who? Both of you. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the city wake up around me. Taxis, delivery trucks, commuters with coffee and headphones, completely unaware that somewhere above them, billion-dollar reputations were burning. I could fight this. I would fight this. But the cost was rising. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if victory would mean survival. When I got back to my apartment, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Just my name written in sharp black ink. Inside was a flash drive. One file. No signature. I plugged it into my laptop. A video opened grainy security footage from Hamilton Tower. It showed Evan handing a check to Adrian. The date stamp was last week, proof. My breath caught. The existence of the tape was a lifeline, but the anonymous sender was a wild card. Someone else was playing the endgame too. Lisa called again. "Did you see it?" she asked before I could speak. "Who sent this?" I said. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they want you to fight back." I stared at the frozen image on the screen, Evan's hand, the envelope, Adrian's guilt. For days I'd been reacting, running defense. Now finally, the tide had turned. "Get the legal team ready," I said, "and call the journalists who still believe in truth. It's time to go public." Lisa hesitated. "Elena, are you sure you want to light this fuse?" I looked at the city lights blinking in the distance. Hamilton Tower standing tall, waiting for its reckoning. "Yes," I said, "because when it burns this time, I'm not walking away." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the sound merging with the hum of the city. This was not revenge. This was the final calculation of a debt. The minute the sun rose, the story was everywhere. Hamilton Empire, built on fraud. Whistleblower reveals family cover-up. EP Capital CEO exposes corporate corruption. I hadn't spoken a word to the press, but somehow the right documents, the truth had found their way into every major outlet in the country. It was the kind of story that spread faster than anyone could contain. The kind that didn't need spin because the facts were explosive on their own. At 7:30, I stood by my window watching the city's pulse shift. Somewhere out there, Richard Hamilton's legacy was dissolving into public outrage. Stock values were plunging, shareholders were demanding emergency meetings, and government investigators were circling like vultures. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Lisa burst through my office door, breathless. "You did it. It's out." "I didn't," I said. "Someone else did." She stopped short. "You mean the video?" I nodded. "The video was already everywhere now." She ran a hand through her hair. "Then who did?" "I don't know," I said quietly. "But whoever it was, they wanted the world to see everything." By noon, the Hamilton headquarters was surrounded by reporters. From my view, the news choppers circling Hamilton Tower looked like agitated flies feeding on a carcass. Evan had canceled the press conference, but his silence was confirmation enough. The board of directors released a statement calling for an immediate internal investigation. Translation: they were cutting him loose. When I arrived at my building later that day, Adrian was waiting in the lobby. His eyes were bloodshot. His suit wrinkled his expression somewhere between exhaustion and guilt. "We need to talk," he said. I hesitated, then motioned toward the private conference room. Once the door shut, he collapsed into a chair. I didn't think it would go this far. He promised, he said, no one would get hurt. "He's a Hamilton," I said. "You really believe that?" He rubbed his face. "You don't understand. They had me cornered. My family." "You had a choice," I interrupted. "You could have trusted me. Instead, you handed him the match." He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "And what about you, Elena? You think you're innocent in all this. You built this war. You taught me to weaponize anonymity and financial codes." For a moment, the words hit harder than I wanted to admit. "I taught you to survive," I said. "That's not the same thing." He laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the people whose careers are ashes now." I leaned against the table, arms crossed. "If you came here for forgiveness, you're in the wrong room." "I came to warn you," he said. "Evan's not done. He's calling for a criminal suit accusing you of corporate sabotage and data theft." I smiled faintly. "Then he hasn't learned that you can't sue someone for exposing the truth." But even as I said it, I knew the fight wasn't over. Evan still had connections, judges, politicians, people who owed his family favors. He'd use every one of them before he fell. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because I'm tired of being scared, he said. And because part of me still believes in what we started. He slid an envelope across the table. You'll need this. I opened it. Bank statements, correspondence logs, confidential memos. Proof of Hamilton's offshore accounts tied directly to political bribes. Enough to end Evan's career forever. Where did you get this? I asked. He looked at me, a sad smile tugging at his lips. Let's just say fear makes people careless. The storm hit that night. At exactly 9:04 p.m., the SEC announced an official investigation into Hamilton Industries. Within minutes, the company's stock dropped 30%. The family's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. And at 9:17, Richard Hamilton called me. Elena. His voice rasped through the phone. You've made your point. Have I said. I'm dying, he said simply. I have weeks left, maybe less. Do you really want this to be the last thing you do to destroy what's left of your family, I whispered. You destroyed that when you made me your scapegoat. Silence. Then, you sound just like him, blindly righteous. I closed my eyes. Don't you dare use my father as a shield for your guilt. I'm trying to save what's left, he said. Not for me, for Grace. My chest tightened. She made her choice. She always does, Elena. He said, his voice softening. I didn't just marry her. I raised you. I gave you a name, a life. You gave me a lie, I snapped. And now it's ending. You can't fix it with apologies. He exhaled, the sound heavy with years of regret. You won't find peace in this. I'm not looking for peace, I said. I'm looking for the truth. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the city lights flickering outside. Somewhere in that vast skyline, the man who'd fired me was watching his empire collapse. And maybe for the first time realizing who had built it in the first place. At dawn, Lisa called. You should turn on Channel 8. I did. Evan Hamilton was being escorted out of his office in handcuffs. The footage looped every hour, his face pale, his mouth tight, the press shouting questions he couldn't answer. Fraud, conspiracy, bribery. Every headline was another nail in the coffin. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just watched. Because victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like silence after years of noise. Later that afternoon, Grace appeared in my office without calling first. Her pearls were gone, her hair pulled back, her face older than I remembered. You won, she said quietly. No, I said. I ended it. She walked toward the window, staring out at the city that once belonged to her husband. You know he's dying, I know. He asked for you, she said. He wants to see you. I hesitated. Why to say goodbye? I didn't smile. The thought of seeing him, of facing the man who represented years of calculated coldness, didn't make me twist. It made me calculate, what is the utility of a final conversation? I'll think about it, I said finally. Grace nodded, turning to leave. At the door, she paused. You remind me of him sometimes. Your real father. She shook her head softly. He'd be sad, because he chose creation, and you chose demolition. When she was gone, I sat in the quiet for a long time, the city humming beneath me. Evan was in custody. Richard was dying. The Hamilton name was finished. And yet, I felt hollow. The fire I'd started had burned through everything, every lie, every betrayal, but also every connection I'd ever had. I'd won the war. But at what cost? As the sun dipped below the skyline, my reflection appeared in the glass, a woman shaped by revenge standing in the ruins of her own making. The phone buzzed again. Another call, another headline. I didn't answer. Instead, I whispered to my reflection, the slate is clean. Now we build the future. The city gave no reply, only the distant sound of sirens and the echo of everything I'd destroyed to feel free. The hospice smelled of antiseptic and rain, a sterile quiet where ambition came to decompose. It was the kind of quiet that feels permanent, where every sound, the beeping monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes echoed like an unwanted memory. I hadn't planned to come. For days, Grace's calls went unanswered. But when her last message said, "He's asking for you by name," something inside me cracked open. The hallway seemed endless white walls, muted lights, and at the very end, room 314. I paused outside the door, my hand hovering over the handle. The last time I'd seen Richard Hamilton, he was on top of the world, towering, calculating, untouchable. Now behind that door, he was a man waiting to disappear. When I finally pushed it open, the sight almost didn't register. He looked smaller somehow, shrunken into the hospital bed, his once perfect hair gray and uneven. Tubes traced along his arms, machines hummed like whispers of time counting down. He turned his head slightly. "Elena." The sound of my name in his voice startled me. It wasn't the commanding tone of a CEO. It was frail human. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't." Grace rose from the chair beside him. She looked at me, her eyes swollen but steady. "I'll give you two a moment." When she left the room, felt heavier. I took the chair opposite his bed but didn't speak. "You did it," he said finally. "You won. I didn't come to talk about that." "Then why are you here?" The question hung between us like smoke. I didn't know how to answer. Maybe to prove to myself that I could look him in the eye without hating him. Maybe to see if there was anything left of the man I once called father. "You always had your mother's stubbornness," he said, forcing a weak smile. "But you've got my fire. That's what made you dangerous." "I didn't want your fire," I said softly. "I wanted your honesty." He coughed, and the sound of it seemed to rattle the authority he once possessed. His body barely shifted under the thin blanket. "You think this was all about money? It wasn't. It was survival. You stole everything from my father, including the faith he had in his own creation." He nodded slowly. "Yes, and I've spent the rest of my life paying for it. Every success I had carried his ghost." I looked away, jaw tight. "That doesn't undo what you did." "No," he said. "It doesn't. But maybe it explains why I couldn't stop you. Watching you tear it all down, it was like watching myself decades ago. Only you were better." "Don't romanticize this," I said, my voice breaking. "You destroyed lives. You raised me to believe power mattered more than truth. And you proved me wrong," he whispered. The words silenced me. He closed his eyes briefly, his breathing shallow. "There's a file on my desk at home," he said. "Your father's original designs. He wanted to build a company that made a difference, not just profits. You can still do that. Don't let what I built poison what he dreamed." "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "Yes, you can," he said, "because you already burned away everything that wasn't real." He reached for my hand. For a moment, I didn't move. Then slowly I let him take it. His fingers were cold, his grip weak but deliberate. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I hesitated. I did. And now I looked at the man who had shaped both my ruin and my rise. "Now I don't know what I feel. Maybe that's the punishment. You don't even deserve my hate anymore." He exhaled almost a sigh of relief. "Then maybe we're both free." We sat in silence until his breathing steadied again. The monitor beeped in rhythm with his pulse slow and fragile. "Evan's in prison," I said finally. "He'll face trial next month." He nodded faintly. He was always too much like me. I wanted better for him, but I raised another version of myself. "That's the curse of men like us. You still have time to say something to him." "No," he said. "He wouldn't listen. He never did." The room grew quiet again. I found myself staring at the window where rain streaked down the glass in silver threads. For years I'd dreamed of this moment, of him powerless, of me standing over him with victory in my hands. But sitting there, all I felt was the weight of everything that couldn't be undone. He squeezed my hand once more. "Don't let revenge be the only thing that defines you, Elena. You deserve more than I ever did." When I looked back, his eyes had closed again, his breathing slowing into something faint, fragile, final. "I already have more," I whispered. "Because I still have a soul." He didn't answer. The machines continued their quiet hum, steady and indifferent. I sat there for a long time watching the rise and fall of his chest until it stopped. By evening, I stood outside the hospice with Grace. She clutched a small envelope, the death certificate, the last piece of his empire reduced to a few lines of paper. "He asked me to give you something," she said. From her purse, she pulled out a small, worn notebook. The leather cover was cracked, edges frayed. I opened it to find my father's handwriting sketches. Ideas, the beginnings of the company that started everything. Grace said quietly, "He wasn't always the man you knew at the end. Once he wanted to build something beautiful. That's the part you get to reclaim." I traced the faded ink with my fingers. It felt like touching a ghost. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "I guess we both lost sight of that." As she walked away, I stayed there under the dim glow of the streetlight, the notebook clutched to my chest. The city lights flickered in the distance, reflections of what used to be power, now just remnants of ambition. For the first time in years, I felt empty, not angry, not vindicated, just hollow. Like the storm had finally passed, leaving nothing behind but the quiet. When I got home, I placed the notebook on my desk beside a single glass of scotch. The last page bore a line in my father's handwriting. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you make right before you go." I read it 3 times before closing the cover. Outside the city hummed restless as always, but somewhere beneath that noise, I felt something new. Something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, and maybe just maybe forgiveness, trying to take root in the ashes. The funeral was small. Gray skies, a few umbrellas, the kind of chill that seeps through black wool and bones alike. Only a handful of people came, former colleagues, lawyers, a scattering of investors pretending it was about respect, not curiosity. Grace stood by the casket, her face composed but hollow, while the priest murmured about redemption. I stayed at the back, watching the rain slide down the polished wood. Richard Hamilton, husband, father, empire builder, thief, was finally still. For all his power, it ended like this, a small square of earth and a silence too heavy for words. When the service ended, Grace approached. "He left instructions," she said, her voice brittle. "A sealed letter for you. It's in his lawyer's office. He said you'd know what to do with it." I didn't answer. She looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "You look just like him when you're suppressing a strategic move." She left before I could reply. 2 days later, I sat in the lawyer's office, rain tapping against the window again. The man across from me, a polished type with gold cufflinks and a practiced sympathy, slid an envelope across the desk. "Mr. Hamilton's final letter," he said. "He asked that it be given to you upon confirmation of his death." I opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. You probably don't believe me, but I admired you more than anyone I ever met. You were everything I couldn't be: fearless, honest, relentless. I spent my life building a kingdom out of lies, but you tore it down and found the truth beneath it. Don't waste it like I did. There's a file attached to this letter. Use it however you see fit. You're the rightful heir to what your father began and what I corrupted. One last thing, don't let them define the new narrative. You are the architect now. R.H." The lawyer handed me a small USB drive sealed in a plastic sleeve. "That's the file," he said. He told me it's everything. Ownership documents, patents, and legal filings he never used. You have full authority to claim his remaining shares, meaning Miss Park. You're now the majority shareholder of Hamilton Industries." The next morning, the boardroom was full. Every executive, every nervous attorney, every face that once turned smugly toward Evan or bowed to Richard's authority, now sat upright, cautious, waiting. I entered without ceremony. My heels clicked against the stone floor as I crossed the room and set the briefcase on the table. "Good morning," I said. No one replied. I opened the briefcase, removed the documents, and placed them on the polished table: title transfers, the original patent files, and the notarized proof of ownership. "Effective immediately," I said. "Hamilton Industries falls under new leadership." A murmur rippled through the room. One man cleared his throat. "Miss Park, with all due respect, are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," I interrupted. "I'm stating it. I own this company, and I intend to rebuild it. Silence. Lisa stood near the window, arms crossed, a small smile flickering across her face. She'd insisted on being there, on witnessing the moment neither of us had dared to imagine years ago. The chairman of the board adjusted his glasses. "And what exactly do you plan to do with the company, Miss Park? Its reputation is in ruins. The stock is plummeting. The name Hamilton is synonymous with scandal." "That's why it's not Hamilton anymore," I said. "Effective today, it's Park Innovations." The silence broke into shocked whispers. One woman at the far end of the table spoke hesitantly. "You're renaming it. I'm reclaiming it," I said. "This company was founded on stolen ideas and false pride. It's time it stood for something real, something honest. My father believed technology should serve people, not power." "That's what we'll return to," another voice cut in. "You'll never recover the market share." I met his gaze evenly. "I don't plan to. I plan to redefine it." Lisa stepped forward, placing a tablet on the table. "This is our new proposal," she said. "Clean energy systems, sustainable design, and decentralized data platforms. The future Richard Hamilton ignored because he was too busy protecting the past." I turned to the board. "You can stay and build this with me, or you can walk out now. But if you stay, you play by my rules: transparency, accountability, innovation. No more greed disguised as legacy." No one moved. Then slowly the chairman nodded. "You have my vote." One by one, others followed. When it was done, I stood at the head of the table, the same place Richard once stood, the same view of the skyline, but everything felt different. The air, the light, the silence. Mine. That evening I stood in the same penthouse where it all began. The furniture was covered in sheets, the bar empty, the air stale with memory. I poured one final drink and walked to the window. The city glowed below, alive, relentless, indifferent. For years, revenge had been my compass, guiding every choice, every sleepless night. But standing there, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge wasn't the destination. It was the bridge. The fire that burned everything false until there was nothing left but truth. And the truth was this: I wasn't the broken daughter he fired that day. I wasn't the quiet girl everyone dismissed. I was the new owner. The next morning I visited my father's grave for the first time in years. The grass was still damp from the rain, the headstone simple and unadorned. I set the notebook down, the one Grace had given me, full of his sketches and dreams, and rested my hand on the stone. "I did it," I whispered. "But not the way you'd think." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and low. "I thought revenge would feel like victory," I said. "But it feels like letting go. And maybe that's what you wanted all along." I stood there for a while, letting the quiet settle around me. When I finally turned to leave, I felt lighter, not because the past had vanished, but because it no longer owned me. That night I sat in my office overlooking the city. The glass walls reflected the new logo behind me, Park Innovations. Lisa appeared at the door. "The press wants a statement," she said. "Give them one," I said. "Tell them the story isn't about a fall or a feud. Tell them it's about a woman who refused to stay erased." She smiled. "They'll love that." As she left, I looked out at the skyline again. Somewhere out there, people were already talking, speculating, rewriting, misunderstanding. But that was fine. Because the people who mattered already knew the truth. The noise of the past finally faded away. For the first time, I wasn't fighting to survive, I was simply alive. I was leading. And this time, it was mine. If you've ever felt that, share your story. Because this is only the beginning.